Welcome. Thanks for joining us again. My name is Robert Shelton. I'm a seminarian for Archdiocese of San Antonio, and today I'm joined by some of my brothers at the seminary, all studying for Archdiocese of San Antonio. We got Diego here, Joseph, and Dalton, and we're super excited to be here with you. And today we're going to be talking about formation and what is formation. I think, I know I was in that position when I entered seminary and I got accepted, and then I start hearing this word a lot about formation, right, or how seminary works. And it is kind of a question. It's like, okay, you're in seminary, now what? Is it just like a normal school? Is it like going to college and then graduate studies? Is it like boot camp? Is it, what is it? And so I think, we thought we'd gather a couple guys here today and explain to you, so that way, if any of you who are discerning or interested, you get ahead of the game, because it is a little daunting. It is a little, a learning process, and there's a lot of moving parts. It's not just one organization that trains us. It's not just one organization or school that we learn from. We learn from a lot of different organizations and groups, and so I think the most basic thing I think we start off talking about is just what is formation, right? So I don't know if any of y'all want to explain what formation means, or how you've had to explain best, or has anyone got any?
Yeah, just everything you said. That's it.
I'm just kidding.
No, I think, there's definitely a lot of things. I think I'll start with just what I thought formation was first. So I'll be honest, when I first did a dinner, it was like a dinner called St. Andrew's Dinner for guys that are interested, and I went in my head thinking it was going to be a trap. So it was going to be like, I'd go, they signed me up, and that'd be it. But it was nothing like that. Thanks be to God, there was great priests there, great deacons, just kind of they're talking to you, getting to know you, and I was like, oh, what a relief, right? And so I was like, okay, but then how do these guys get that way, right? How do they get to this point that I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're such holy people. And I think to try and generalize it and to get into kind of a phrase would be that all the seminarians that come in, we're not perfect people. And I think that's very important to understand. Even now, we're not perfect people. Even when we leave formation, we're not perfect people. But the idea is that we come into formation so that not to end up being perfect people, but to strive for it, right? We hear Jesus say, "To be perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect." And so that's what comes to mind for me, is that all these people come in broken, and we still leave broken, but hopefully we're a little less broken, right? We're a little bit healed. And so formation is just getting us ready so that we can go out and serve God's people in the capacity of priesthood, God willing. And so it obviously takes a little bit of molding, formation, you might say, forming us into the men that we're being called to be becoming. I had to, I thought that through, don't worry. So becoming who God is asking us to be. That's for me what formation is.
Yeah, awesome. I think you have a really apt description of that. We all come in as we are, and the church works with what we got, right? And I don't know if you have that experience too, because you came from music, right? Very regimented. How you were instructed, right? So how do we compare? How does seminary compare to the rigors of?
It's honestly very similar, because when I was in college studying music, you had a very set schedule of practicing. Every day you would try to get in a certain amount of hours in practicing, and also going to classes, studying. And here it's very much the same. You have a very set schedule of prayer times. You have your classes that you go to each day. So for me, it wasn't very different. It was different in
the content.
Yeah, the content of what we were doing, but the rigor and the scheduling was very similar for me.
Nice.
Yeah. I played clarinet once, and I didn't do very well. And it is seminary is very much like they both said, it's building up, and it's kind of building up on the virtues, right? That's a lot of what you'll hear a lot of priests say and formators say, that formators are the priests who teach us in the seminary. They talk about building up your virtues and trying to kind of minimize your vices. It really is about working on the human character of it. But there's more to, being a seminarian than just working on your, we're people. We're always going to be broken. So there's other aspects to becoming a priest than just working on yourself. And that's why actually the church has what's called the 4 pillars of formation, right? And this is actually the cornerstone, or really the foundation of what seminarians are supposed to be learning and what they're supposed to be doing. And those 4 are human formation, which is, like we kind of hinted on here, it's, working on yourself, working on virtues. Yeah, it's like, getting up in the morning, being regimented, working on your language or whatever it may be, working on yourself, working on your health even. Then you have what's called the intellectual, and that's kind of the one I think most people think about when they think of formation. That's your academics. That's studying philosophy and theology and all your other things. And then you have what's called pastoral, which is working on doing ministries. We get assigned ministries, right? I'm sure y'all have had some experience so far being assigned different ministries. That can be youth, that can be working in a church, serving as an altar server, and that's a real critical one, right? And then there's the last one, which is spiritual, right? Which really kind of underlies the other 3, which is working on your own spiritual growth. How to become closer to Christ, how to become closer to God. And from all these really comes all of our formation, right? And so I know it's sometimes hard to, because they all interconnect, right? I don't know if y'all found that the intellectual really builds upon your other ones. Human builds upon another one. Have y'all found that to be the case?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Very cool. And so now we've kind of explained a little bit about what formation is, right? Maybe we should go into what's the process, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the best way to go about that would be to talk about the discernment house.
Yeah.
Because if we were to work our way kind of bottom up, then like the process would be like if you were interested in coming into the seminary, especially here in San Antonio, you would enter into what's called the discernment house. And then so I'll let a few guys that actually went through the discernment house kind of talk about that, because I didn't have experience with that, but if y'all want to take over that.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. So this is, I think now this is like the first step for guys who are discerning priesthood to go through. Let's say like a guy who's really feeling called to the priesthood. He's saying, I think God wants me to come to seminary, but I don't know what to do. So what I guess the guy would do is go talk to the vocation director, come here, have some meetings, just discuss like the process that he's been going through. And I think they will tell him that what you first got to do is you got to join the discernment house as a kind of a preparatory stage to see if you're really getting onto something in here.
Right.
If this is really what you're wanting to do or feeling called to do. How was that for you?
Yeah, for me, I actually went through the first class of the discernment house. So when I entered, it was the first ever time that they had ever done it. So I was there for the opening. It was very much a different experience for us. I know you had a very much different experience than I did. But it was good for me because it gave me like a halfway point. I had like a step into the regular world, but a step into the seminary as well. And that was good for me because I was a business student before I entered the seminary. So I was still at St. Mary's, wasn't taking business classes because I was preparing to enter the seminary. But I was still talking to the friends that I had before. And then I also was starting to build those connections with the seminarians around us. So I know that's a little bit different for some of the guys, but it was really helpful for me in order to kind of see like, oh yeah, this is kind of like a new home for me. Right. And it was a good, like I said, a halfway point for me. So that was great.
Yeah, it was a really good way to prepare for seminary. Even if the guys who weren't, I guess, who didn't feel called at the end to join seminary, for me it was really good because you had a really good prayer schedule. You were living in community with other guys who were really strong about their faith, and you're also, in my case, we were studying the catechism, studying scripture, just talking about the faith every day. So it was a really good way to just really deepen the faith and just really get into it in a single place.
Could y'all walk us through kind of what the schedule would kind of look like, and kind of how the balance is struck between I know, Dalton, you mentioned being still in the real world, but also still kind of halfway into the seminary, this kind of dynamic. Either one of you could kind of walk us through kind of what your day-to-day would look like, or kind of what that felt like.
So like I said, mine was a little bit different than Joseph's was, but what I did for the most of the part of my day was we would start with morning prayer or mass, depending on the day. Then after that, we would go to breakfast. I would go to classes. Some of the guys were going to classes downtown. I was going to classes just down the street because I was studying at St. Mary's. After I finished all my classes over there, I would have some time just for homework and study or just leisure, however. But then after that, we would normally have either Lectio Divina or a rosary or something we had, depending on the day. We would usually have something midday, as well as our Vespers and Mass. And then after that point, then we would have we would sometimes have our community points, and we would kind of just get to know the other aspirants that were in the discernment house, as well as since we were on the campus, every once in a while we would get to see some of the seminarians as well. So that was it was a little bit of a lax from what I hear from the other guys went through, but for me it was extremely helpful because it was a point of a basic structure that kind of prepared me for the seminary.
Yeah, and y'all were kind of the guinea pig group, so
yes, we were.
Yeah, so whatever y'all did, it kind of they decided that didn't work or that did work. So
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, because discernment houses are really kind of a new or fairly new. Some dioceses have done it for a while, but a lot of dioceses are starting them because it's a way for guys to get their foot in the door. Because you're not yet a seminarian where you're called a discerner, right, or an aspirant, or a candidate, right. You're not yet accepted into seminary, but it's a great way to get your feet in the door, and it really helps with that transition too. Because I know you came from work. And I know for me, I was actually in limbo for about a month, before I entered seminary. And it is kind of all right, where am I going to stay? I'm getting out of my apartment. I'm doing this. And, especially too when you're trying this out, it's a good way to get your toe in the water. And it also prepares you. Because I know y'all have entered, and actually kind of had a leg up to an extent. I got guys like me or Diego, we entered right in. Our first day here was as a seminarian. Yeah. And, we were scrambling to figure out how to do prayer and what's going on, and y'all entered in like, I got this.
Yeah, I know. That's what I really liked about it, because initially I was just wanting to go straight into seminary.
Right.
Like I didn't want to do any formation before that. But I'm really glad that they made us do that, because it was a really great way for me to learn like the liturgy of the hours, how to pray, morning prayer, evening prayer, all those, and just how to really live again in a community, because the last time I'd done that was in college dorms, so it had been a while.
Yeah.
For me it was just a really good, necessary almost transition from just regular life outside of seminary and then gradually going into seminary. And then once I actually started here this past spring, I was much better prepared. I feel like it would have been a lot more hectic for me if I had just gone straight into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think another great thing, and you mentioned breakfast, and that just made me think like, oh yeah, there's so many great things about the discernment house that was like, I think would be great, not necessarily selling points, but selling points on like how like you mentioned, and I like going back to it, this idea of being kind of in between, and the idea of, that's what discernment is, right? Like you're kind of trying to make the decision, trying to decide what is God calling you to do, and if you're gonna say yes. And so like there's benefits to that. Like you get to live here on campus at Assumption Seminary, and then you also get like meals provided to you. You get a place to stay. You mentioned community. You get like brothers to like hang out with, and also to talk about God, which like also like I had a bit of college experience coming in before, and it's a little bit more difficult to find that, especially in a college setting. Like you might get the other things like somewhere to stay, food to eat, but you don't get the faith community. So this kind of gives you all of that. For a period of time to where you can actually take time and discern. So yeah, that's from only entering in without the discernment house. That's things that I look at like, oh man, that would have been great. Not to say that like, oh, I needed it or I should have done it, but I think there would have been a lot of benefits into my own formation in the seminary if I would have done that beforehand. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, so the seminary, the discernment house prepares you to enter seminary. And for our diocese, so different dioceses do it differently, but for ours, it's typically about a semester. But, so you're done with the discernment house, and now you're in seminary, right? And what does that look like, right? What are the processes? So you've been accepted, so you got to apply, right? You apply to seminary. Big old packet, you got psych evals, you got counseling, nothing crazy, I mean, they're trying to make sure you're not crazy, but to what degree is the question.
Right.
But, so you apply. It's like a normal college application. You work with your vocation director, steps you through the process. It takes about a year on average, right, from beginning to end, and included in that might be you're in the discernment house.
Right.
But now you've been accepted, right? And so what the Vatican and what the Church lays out for priestly formation is that all priests, right, have to have a Master's of Divinity, right, or at least here in the United States for the USCCB and most of the Western world. And what a Master's of Divinity is of course, it's a graduate level degree. Well, to get a graduate level degree, you got to have a bachelor's, right? Yeah. Well, you have to have specific bachelor's to study Master of Divinity, and that is basically a bachelor's in what's sometimes called pastoral ministry, sometimes called Catholic philosophy, and there's a few other degrees, but in general, it's one of those first two. And so that's what the seminary provides. So there's two programs when you first enter seminary that one may be a part of, and that's either the college formation for those who don't have any kind of bachelor's, right? They don't have any college, so they entered when they're young, like 18, 19, 20. They had some college, like Diego and I, and they're just going to finish their degree. Oh, and Dalton as well, yes. And you already had a degree. You already had a bachelor's, right? So Joseph, had a degree. You had a degree in music, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that case, you would have entered what's called the pre-theology program. So what the college formation again is, and pre-the, is they both have what's called the same formation program in terms of the actual human formation and spiritual, right? But intellectual's a little different, right? So for pre-thees, y'all only have to get 40 hours, right? Or it's like 2 years.
Yeah, it's
right?
2 years of philosophy.
2 years of philosophy where you take, classes in metaphysics and all these kind of classic, Catholic philosophy and theology stuff.
Logic.
Logic. I love logic, right?
Fascinating. Yeah.
And the great benefit here for our cameraman Moses is laughing right now. For our seminary here and for San Antonio is we own our own seminary. We're one of the few dioceses in the United States that still has our own seminary. And of course we have other dioceses that come here. But so how our intellectual formation works is we have a school called MAC, Mexican American Catholic College, which is run by the diocese. A priest in the diocese runs it, Father Juan Molina. Yeah. And then we work with the University of the Incarnate Word that accredits MAC for our intellectual credits. So actually, if you enter in for college, you go to UIW, but you take classes at MAC in philosophy by priests. Right. Priests teach you, right? Yeah. And then you got MAC. So I don't know if y'all, I'm in theology now, so I'll let y'all are more experienced in college.
Okay.
I left you. I'm sorry. But why don't y'all talk about what's the how was it, or how is it taking philosophy and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that's also important to mention is that it's right across the street from the seminary. That's so great. But then at the same time, you can't be late to class, right? Because you can't be like, oh, traffic, because it's like you walk the street and it's there. But yeah, so I came into the seminary with an associate's degree, but not a bachelor's. So I had some college experience, and I was at the University of Texas at San Antonio studying communications before I came in. And then that's when I kind of just started discerning on my own, and then I entered before the discernment house existed. And then so when I came in, I kind of didn't know what I was going to study until they showed me the sheet. It was like, okay, yeah, you got to study philosophy first, get your bachelor's in pastoral ministry with the focus in philosophy. I think that's what we call it. And then from there, you would go to study theology. And so for me, I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. Like, why philosophy if we're going to, like, and I think just from my preconceived notions, I didn't know why, right? And I didn't understand the great connection that philosophy has with theology. But then as soon as we started studying it and we started studying like the ancient philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and how a lot of their thinking and stuff like that helped flesh out so many really just the way the world kind of developed. And so that type of stuff is fascinating to me. And then we also study sacramental theology, the theology behind the sacraments and how they're efficacious and how they work and stuff like that. And so for me, it was a massive switch from studying communications, where it was already something that I was kind of losing interest in when I was at UTSA. I was kind of just I don't know if I can see myself loving these classes or loving to do this for the rest of my life. And yet here we are shooting a podcast. But I think when we started studying philosophy, started studying the church, there are things that I grew up with, right? And so I could find out the reasons why. We don't just do this or that in mass just because, right? There's a reason behind it. And so we would learn that. And so for me, studying that in college and then getting the degree in it, I think it's more than just being like, oh, I have a piece of paper that says I did something, right? It's like it's part of the formation. It's the intellectual formation to not only have the faith and belief in what you're doing, but also to know, right? To know in your head how certain things work and why certain things work. So to me, it's been great so far, especially making the switch into something that I really love and can really like give myself to. Yeah. That's just me.
Yeah, excellent. Dalton, what's your thoughts? How has college been so far for you? Has it been? I mean,
For me, it's been good. I have, like I said, I was previously in college before, so I'm just kind of filling in. I just mainly did basics, so I didn't have to worry about those too much. So that means I went straight into philosophy. So pretty much all of my classes were at Mock. And I still have a few basics to finish up at UIW, but for the most part, my classes haven't been at UIW. So I have like 2 classes that were asynchronous. Have never stepped onto UIW's campus, but that's where I'm going to get my degree from. So that's a little odd, but it's been really good to like Diego said, it's been nice to just walk across the street and have that idea of philosophy being changed inside of my mind. Because when I remember at St. Mary's, we had to take a philosophy class just as one of our core classes. And I was like, why are we doing this? Because I was like, these are pagans. and we're thinking about what their thoughts were. I was like, well, how does this connect? But then later on, I'm seeing, okay, well, they're still in the human condition. They still have the same thoughts as we do. They might have taken it a different way or made a different conclusion, but that still has a basis for our thoughts. So just a way of considering the human mind in humanity. It was very eye-opening for me.
And the love of wisdom. I mean, that's
Yes.
what philosophy means, right? And that's like for one of the first classes, that's what they told us, and I think that helped me be like, okay, then it's more than just like studying a bunch of old guys and like what they thought. Like it's more than that. But I think you touched on basics, which I think is which I forgot to mention. But yeah, this idea that like when you're taking your basics in college, for the most part, it's all going to be the same, no matter what you're studying. And then later on, like in the 2 years, like where we study majority philosophy, that's where it gets specialized, which I find really cool about Mock, because then you get to do that at UIW, which is a very prestigious school here in San Antonio, here in Texas as well. And so you get a great education from a great university by being in the seminary. And I mean, the people of God are very generous, and they help us like get funds for that and to go there. So just a big shout out to all the people of God. Yeah.
I think both y'all brought up some interesting points. Is number one is Diego brings up a good point, is that for our diocese and how a lot of dioceses work is once you've been accepted, we're put on scholarship. There's not that many seminarians, so it's but we are very blessed that we're on full ride scholarships on behalf of the Archdiocese of San Antonio people of God to study. And it's a lifelong vocation, so it's an investment, that will pay dividends. But I think, I want to go back to Dalton and talk really about UIW, because this is very unique about this seminary. Most seminaries, everything's done in-house, meaning all your formation, all your intellectual is done by the priests or the monks at times in certain monasterial seminaries, such as St. Ben's, I believe, in Louisiana. But here, we have the benefit, actually, that collegians get to, and prethees to an extent, get to actually still go to school with their peers, people who are studying secular degrees. So I was in a similar position to both of you. I entered in after I went to Texas Tech, and I only had to go to UIW for, I think, one class to finish a basic. And so I hardly ever went to UIW. But, Dalton, of course, we're doing this in a post-COVID world. Yeah. So we're going to be going back to UIW. But, you do get to go on campus. And how is that? I mean, I know you've been there a few times. You've kind of walked around. You've gone to classes with some UIW students. How is that experience?
Yeah, like I said, I have not had a class on UIW's campus yet, but I have spoken with a number of them who come to Mock. And I think that it's a really good opportunity for us to find that connect between the intellectual and the other 3 pillars of formation as well. Because when we're completely cut off from the rest of the world, it's very isolated, and it can kind of puts the blinders across your mind about how the real world goes. But this way we have, like we said, we still have one foot in the real world, and we're able to better connect and see how we can consistently work with the people of God, and understand how we can better prepare ourselves for them.
And you are, a cardinal, right? Because I just, by preparing to be people, you do become a cardinal early because UIW mascot's the Cardinals. And, but that's cool. I think that's something to note on that. Even though you haven't got to experience that, you will this year. You will this upcoming year. You are a full, incarnate word, cardinal, flying cardinal. I don't even know what we were, whatever, a Razorback cardinal, something, But you get to go to the football games. You get access to the gyms. You get access to the library. You get access to all these. It's a beautiful campus. I just think that's awesome. Again, I didn't get to experience that too much. I think Diego's in a similar boat. But go Texas Tech, by the way. But I just remember, and that's a great part of formation. I think you both of you really kind of brought some great aspects of how philosophy really builds up the groundwork for studying kind of the meat of seminary formation, which is theology, right? Because if you're in pre-the, you only do it for 2 years. Or most guys in college, they enter with some, credit now, so they really only maybe in college for 2 years maybe.
Right.
So once you graduate and you have your bachelor's of philosophy or pastoral ministry, then you go on to theology, right? And you're called a theologian, which sounds really cool, but doesn't mean you know any theology. So in theology, which is I'm in theology 2 now, so I'm starting my second year of theology. What do? We study theology. I mean, but a lot of it's built up on the ground of the groundwork you did in philosophy. So now and just like any other master's or graduate level program, you're really focusing in on things. So like Diego mentioned earlier about we do sacramentals. You study sacramental theology or you study moral theology, right? You take a moral theology class when you're in college formation. Well, now it's what is you'll have classes on marriage, right? You'll have classes on pastoral ministry itself, about how do you, pastoral counseling, right? How do you counsel people? How do you counsel people as a priest? And you have classes later on about how to do confession, how to, even say the mass, and you have classes about priestly identity. You also have really in-depth scripture classes. So when I was I'm sure you've all taken it, Father Ed Owens, the Trinitarian priest, awesome guy at Mock, hilarious. He taught us New and Old Testament, which is kind of a big overview. But when you get to theology, you study Torah, and it's all about those 5 books. Or you study things on the Pentateuch, or you study things on the Synoptic Gospels, or you study, and you really hone in. And then there's also electives that are available, which is kind of cool. So you actually get to take things that might be more interesting. I love history, so they had classes on the Council of Trent, and they got classes on Marian theology. And then, after you do this for 2 years, you go on what's called a pastoral internship, which a lot of dioceses do, which is basically you live in a parish for an entire year, and you're kind of supervised, and you get evaluated on how you engage in pastoral situations, right? And that's kind of cool. And we get a little bit of that over the summer, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So you do that for a year, and once you come back, you do your last 2 years of theology. And then you're done. Then you graduate, and then you God willing get ordained. And what's cool about the theology program, though, for our diocese as well is, priesthood is not just a one track. There's no cookie cutter priest. Right. You got priests who do a lot of different roles and responsibilities in the diocese. And Archbishop Gustavo and Bishop Gary and the diocese also really been pushing the seminarians, all of us, to do a little more. Right. So we have Oblate, which is the school where we study our theology through the seminary. Oblate School of Theology offers some extra degrees called, which is a Master of Theology, which is more of a secular degree in addition to Master of Divinity. And you can take what's called an STB, which is a pontifical degree. It's a test, which can allow you to eventually study for doctorates, such as, in canon law or in scripture, which is very cool. And we have priests sometimes go for further degrees. But also what's something that's really cool in terms of formation here in the diocese is we have spiritual direction programs, which some of our seminarians have done. And all these things build up in theology about how to become more of a priest. But
Right, absolutely.
I don't know how y'all excited about getting into theology? You're getting close, both of you, right?
You're making it sound really cool, so yeah. No, honestly, yeah. And I think something that you're kind of getting at is like that there's a lot of work to get done, right? Like there's a lot of things that we need to study. And I think maybe it should have been mentioned earlier, but I guess we can mention it now, is this idea that formation is going to take a while, right? Formation is going to take a while, and it's kind of, the analogy is always drawn with like a medical doctor, and this idea that like you don't want a surgeon to be coming in and operating on you if they only have like a year, 2 years of experience, or 2 years of training or formation, we could say. Like that would be really scary in your situation.
You gotta know their stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's the same thing like with the priest. You don't want a priest that's like that's trying to be the pastor of a community, that's trying to guide the people of God to hear confessions, things like that, do counseling, if they have little to no training on it, right? And it's hard, especially because we have 2,000 years of history, to get all that the church has done and all that the church stands for, all the church believes in such a small period of time. And that's why it takes a little bit of time. And even then, we don't learn everything. And that's why afterwards, after we get ordained, then there's ongoing formation, right? So like that's why this is the idea of formation would be to form the person, and like you said, like it's not a cookie cutter. So it's not that everybody's going to be the exact same, but form who you are in the eyes of God, so that when you leave seminary, that it continues. That it's not just like, oh, it's not the system that's making you do it, but it's the formation, right? The idea that you're becoming who God wants you to be. And that way, like when you're in the parish, like you're still reading books, like you're still learning about different things, and also growing in who you are, so that later on in life, that it continues, right? It's not stagnant. It doesn't stop, because it's infinite what we can learn about God and we can learn about ourselves, which I think is important for our viewers and also for us to remember whenever we're here, that it's like, I'm not gonna just get the degree and then boom, that's it, like that's done, right? Although that'd be great, that's not the case. Yeah.
And I think you bring up a good point about that. There's a lot of faith and trust in formation,
right?
Faith in that where God's leading you, and trust in your superiors. Trust. I mean, there's a lot of supervisors and people looking out for us and formators. We have several priests as part of the seminary. We have a rector. We have a vocation director of seminarians. You got your teachers, your professors, but the nice thing is that they all have a vested interest. They all want us to succeed. They all want us to be good priests. And so you're getting a lot of input. And so, for any of you who are listening, might have previous military experience, you have multiple drill instructors, right? And you have multiple composers in your music, right? But they all have the same goal, the same objective at the end of the day, which is to form good and holy men to be good priests. And, through that, too, one of the big benefits in this diocese, and, it's been our last kind of time before we wrap this up, is, what we do over the summers, right? So, we've discussed kind of the basic, give you a one-on-one on, what you do, academically, intellectually, what's the formation like? The seminary supervises us while we're going to studies at Oblate, Mock, or UIW, right? But what we do in the summers, I mean, I'd love to go surfing and chill, but obviously I don't surf. As you can tell. But what do we do over the summers, right? So the diocese steps in, and then and the Archdiocese of San Antonio says, okay, well, we have a program, and every summer it's a little different depending on what your level is. So like this summer, I'll be going to Mexico to study Spanish with a couple guys. Dalton's going with me as well.
Study Spanish, right? Vacation, that's key.
So we'll be doing what's called Immersion, which is we'll be there for 6 weeks to really get a good grasp of the language to help serve the people of the diocese. Diego's going to be in a parish.
Yes.
Yeah. And before we touch on that really quick, Joseph gets to do the funnest thing of all, which is Archdiocese 101. Do you want to give a brief,
Yeah,
what's that
of course. So all the new guys who, this is their first summer in seminary, they get to spend their summer right across the lawn over in the Chancery, which is the offices of the diocese. So they get to go through, I think week by week, all the different departments of the Archdiocese, like religious education, CTSA.
You'll learn about
I'll learn about all the other ones, as you can see. But yeah, they pretty much just get a really good idea of how the diocese works and operates, meeting all the heads of the different departments. So that gives them a really good, in another way, a good immersion into the diocese. So that's what I'll be doing next month.
And Dalton, you've done that before as well, right?
Yes, I did that last summer.
How was that?
It was a good experience for me because I had known of the Chancery and I knew how some of the interworkings worked, but that gave me the opportunity to meet the people, see the faces of the different people who ran the different offices. So for me, I worked a lot with youth ministry in my own parish, but then I got to meet the person who is the secretariat of the youth ministries. around the Archdiocese. So that was a good thing for me to see. And then as well as I got to meet the vicar of clergy, the chancellor, just any position that has a hand in the inner workings of the Archdiocese. I got to meet all of them and just see how their jobs interact with parish life for us. So that was really a good thing for me to see.
Yeah, it's a big learning experience, and like you said, like you put the face to the people, because I think for myself, I didn't realize how big of an operation it is, because we forget that like there's more to our faith in the way that the Archdiocese run than just like doing the mass and stuff like that. Like somebody's got to pay the lights, somebody's got to organize things, and that's really what the people that work in the chancery do. They help make that a little bit better, make it flow, and so getting to see the departments, getting to see the faces of people, kind of like humanizes it, and it makes it feel like, okay, I can't just like shake my fist at the chancery if something doesn't go my way. Like I know those people, and so I'm gonna ask them for help, which is great, because if God willing we get ordained for this Archdiocese, we know the connections, and if we truly need something, we can go to them, and if they need something from us, then we can give it to them, right? And so knowing them, putting the face to them, I think would be great. So you'll have a great time. Yeah,
I'm excited.
Yeah,
it should be a good experience.
It really is, and it's a lot of fun. You get a lot of good experience, and you know I'd love to discuss it further, and but we're running a little bit out of time. So we're gonna have some future episodes where we discuss more about spiritual, pastoral, and intellectual formation. Really get nailed down. Diego's gonna tell you all about him having fun in the parish. You know, hopefully you're getting assigned somewhere kind of rural, right? No, with Father Pat O'Brien.
Yeah, Father Pat O'Brien.
I was there back in the day.
Excited.
You'll have a lot of fun. So hopefully he watches this and he'll text me. And
Father Pat.
So we really want to thank y'all for being here, for tuning in. We hope we answered some of your questions. Gave you kind of it's a lot of information in a short period of time we're trying to discuss, but really at the end of the day, it's about faith, it's about trust, and it's backed up by 2,000 years of tradition and formation. And so this is how we're formed, this is how we're educated, this is how we're taught, this is how we're trained, and it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of work for the right purpose and for the benefit of the people of God. And so again, we want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching us on YouTube and listening here on this podcast. We hope to see you soon. And so from all of us here, from the Archdiocese, we want to wish you a good day. God bless, and Recum Tech.
Make sure you like and subscribe.
Yeah, that too. And go Assumption. Do we have a mascot? Assumption Seminary? Do we have a mascot?
We'll make one.
We'll make one. All right.
Put in the comments what you want our mascot to be.
Have a good one. Thank you.